Decolonialism may not be enough to explain the implication of European countries in Africa. But in this show, let's focus only on colonialism event and how African women would heal from it. My name is Thierry Francis Mbabane. Political, economical, and social factors are the main reasons why Africa was occupied at that time. It's also important to highlight that today, Africa is still struggling to understand, but also to know other reasons behind the occupation, as by now the wound is still fresh. Actually, some would think that after 7 decades of independence, colonialism would be a dead discussion today. But the truth is, it has been a men's discussion for all the time. They even handle it in their own way. So, today we have questions to ask. And these are questions that should have been taken into consideration by African and European men who sat together and come up with different agreements that we know or we don't know in order to end colonialism. Women have been omitted from these discussions until now. Their absence can be felt today, especially when we tackle issues related to gender culture in Africa. Faith Mkwesha is our guest today. Faith is a researcher in Gender Studies Department and also a teacher of gender in African literature. It's rare to hear a debate that brings on table issues like how colonialism has played a big role in how women are treated in Africa. Is it because colonialism has never affected women in any how?
The situation is that in Africa, where I come from, colonialism imported European ideals of gender. For example, in Southern Africa, we had fluid gender roles, such that women could become leaders. They could become whoever they wanted to be. There was access to that. Women were not like domesticated because they had to go out to fetch firewood, to look for vegetables, to work in the fields. So actually, women were not domesticated. So the concept of domesticating women in the domestic space came with the British gender ideals of domesticity. So in that way, they affected African gender roles. So what we are calling for as African women is that there should be a decolonization of gender roles, because we are saying that the gender inequality that we are experiencing is a result of colonialism. So when we fought against colonialism, women's issues were not given priority. What was given priority was to get flag independence, political independence, so that we could rule ourselves. But in the process, women's issues were not considered to be a priority, because the priority was fighting for independence.
We are talking about these after almost 50 years or more, around 50 years. And why these questions didn't come on table before?
Yeah, that's the interesting question, because this has become even more important now in the 21st century, that you find women are really standing up to demand that they have a right to equality. But it also is influenced by the millennium development goals. One of the goals is to have gender equality amongst all genders. So it actually focuses on women's rights, so that women can have equal access to the economy, equal access to political structures, equal access to public space, so that they can work. So I think there are many issues that are giving rise to this desire for gender equality, especially on the African women's side, because African women feel that they've suffered double oppression. They've suffered oppression during colonialism, whereby they were oppressed by the white masters. They've also suffered oppression from African traditional patriarchy, whereby they've been dominated by men. So since the independence of African states, patriarchal structure, traditional patriarchal structure has remained in place. It is so women now feel that maybe this is the right time to voice their concerns and struggle for this equality.
What is the best tool so far for African women to raise fast and stand on their own rights?
We are pushing for women's rights, but I think the best interventions that women are fighting for, girls must have access to education. Women must have access to education up to universities. You find that there are not many women, African women, who are educated, and there's still a struggle because most families they don't have enough resources, especially money, because most universities, schools, and you have to pay money, and most families don't have enough. So what happens? They give priority to the boy child, and the boy child is sent to school, and the girl child disadvantaged. As a result, you find that there are not many women who are educated. Then those who manage to get education a little bit, it's also a struggle to get access to universities. That's why I find that in most institutions, the lecturers, the professors, and in most private sector, the chief executive officers, they are men. They are not. We don't find many women. So the focus right now is that women should strive for education. They should work hard and get educated, and also that African men should work together with African women to allow to open up space in political structures, in economic structures, in public space, so that women can contribute fully as human beings who can really provide a service and work hard. Actually, what happens is that when women are empowered, you find that the children are also taken care of. I think a lot of research has shown that if women are economically empowered, they provide for their children, they pay fees for their children, they give children more nutritious food, and the children become more healthy. So it is an advantage for the states to support women. And also the Millennium Development Goals is also it's one of the goals that education should be provided to all. Everyone must have access.
In your opinion, Millennium Development Goals, were they a good strategy? Were they really a strong tool for women to get empowered, especially in education?
They gave an opening framework and an opening space whereby women could push for this agenda. So I think they really provided a platform for women to go from the United Nations, to go to their governments, to go and lobby that women should be given access to education. So it was, but it is for the African, for example, in Africa, the African Union had to come up with its own strategies on how women can have access to education. Yeah, there's been some progress, but there's still a lot that needs to be done.
We have a good example in Somalia where they help women who finish primary school to continue by scholarships. And we have many women who are enrolled in higher education or even from secondary up. But we don't have these possibilities with other countries in Africa when you're talking about scholarship, especially for women. What can be done?
Yeah, I come from Zimbabwe, and I also say I come from South Africa because I've been living in those two countries for a long time. You find that there are problems because most women also don't have access to these scholarships, because what happens is that also to get access to some of these scholarships, they look at the transcripts and how they performed, the results they have. So we find that also most women also don't have good environments in their families whereby they can achieve high grades, just like the male child. So at the end of the day, I find most scholarships, they go to the male child because they have the best results from high school. So I think what is needed is to consider that that women should be given a special priority, that they get scholarships so that they also get access to higher education. There are small organizations working on this, but it's not enough. The government actually needs to do something. For example, in South Africa right now, there's a decolonization revolution by students who are arguing that the higher education should be free, because actually what is happening there is that those who have resources, who have money, are the ones who are having access to universities, and those who are coming from underprivileged homes, they have no access, and they are the majority. So what it means is that the superstructure is not changing, the social structure is not changing. Those who are rich keep on having access to all the academic institutions. So yes, there is need for women, I think, to lobby more, to have more scholarship funds focusing on women only. But it's not yet enough. In Zimbabwe, actually, you can't find scholarships like that. They are not there. Most of the families have to pay on their own for university fees for their children. And what happens is, obviously, the male child is given a priority. And then we keep on having this same cycle whereby women have no access to education. Therefore, they cannot be found in the public space.
So, scholarship. And on the other side, we have things that have been working properly, like empowering women when it comes to leadership or decision making, where we have even quotas in those systems. Talking about scholarship, do you think quotas system would work also, or do you think quotas is not a good way of approaching this question? There might be another strategy on top of this.
Yeah, you find that you come, like, for example, in South Africa, they've got many women who are in parliament, but these women are getting quotas through their parties. And so if you are going through your party, then it means you have to stand for what your party wants. So as a result, you find that they are not able to stand up very strongly for women's issues, because they have to stand up for the party, and the party goals, which are also determined by the male patriarchy, who are the leaders in those parties. So I am suspicious. I'm not really supportive of this quota system. I think because it gives the impression that you came in here because of our kindness, otherwise you should not be here. So women don't feel free to really talk about the issues that they want to talk about. I think women should be supported. They should be supported when campaigning, so that they can go there in parliament as independents or as women who won flatly on the same competition, the elections in their parties, not because they have been given something like a favor. Yes.
Yeah. So again, talking about the school system, we normally know that even as school or education in general in Africa, it's still really suffering from many other issues. So we have scholarship. Let's assume we have also those scholarship for women. We have participation, like the Millennium have given free education from primary school. Maybe there might be also free education for secondary school. But what kind of education are we talking about here?
That's the problem. I think that's why I find also there's this idea of decolonizing education, because education should be relevant to the communities, so that whatever is developed as knowledge is emanating from the communities. But what we have at the moment is that most of the knowledge that we are reading, we are teaching, passing on is Eurocentric. It's coming from Europe, and there's no level playing field for African scholars to produce knowledge. So that's why we have also this decolonization struggle that is going on. That is, we are saying we have to produce knowledge from our own philosophies, from our own, that emerges from our own communities, so that that knowledge will be useful to solve the problems we have in our own communities. For example, if in this gender thing that we are talking about, for example, African women, we are saying the issues that are a priority for African women are not the same priorities that European women have here. We have more pertinent issues like poverty, hunger, basic needs, water, maternal health, and all these are other important things that women here in the West are not fighting for anymore. But in our communities, those are the main issues, such that our knowledge that we produce based on those issues should be a form of knowledge that is given space as well. So, but at the moment, we find that there is a problem that African voices are silenced in some of these academic spaces.
Do you feel like these tools that we are given by UN are not really well built?
The tools that it's just a framework, and it's a good framework to start on, but African Union and African governments must develop their own intervention methods. For example, you find that in many schools, they've come up with this idea of feeding schemes, feeding children in schools, because most of the children are malnourished, and because they are malnourished, they could not concentrate in schools and so forth. And so we have each school given this one meal. But the question is again, is that the best way to solve this problem? Because the nutritional problems cannot be solved by just one meal that is given the children once at school. The solution should be, how do we make all this economically sustainable? So the governments should come up with policies that help create jobs, or that support farming in the rural areas where they live on farming, and so that also what they produce, they don't sell it and sell everything, so that or even their own families don't have anything to eat, because the little that they get, they have to sell it and pay fees. So I think some of the solutions that we need to come up with should be relevant to our own problems. But the Millennium Development Goals is a framework, and then from that framework, United African Union should build its own framework as well, and then each government its own framework, and then different institutions come up with framework based on that. But what has been happening is that those even Millennium Goals are not known. No one really even knows them, especially in Africa where I'm coming from. No one talks about them. So they are something like a very abstract thing that is talked about in very elite academic spaces. And those elite academic spaces also don't even understand how to help those who really need this help from some of these millennium goals, so that they can be achieved. So I think, there is a problem. The first thing is that people must be made aware that these are the Millennium Development Goals, and this is what the governments intend to achieve, so that people can work through, come up with interventions that can be useful to their community, and thereby achieve those Millennium Goals. But at the moment, I think it is a problem, because many people don't know about them, and no one can support or develop something that they don't know.
It's true. We have the Millennium Goals that ended in 2015, and straight away we have the Sustainable Development Goals that will end in 2030. But the first gender index that was provided by the African Bank is dated 2015. So what's happening with the African Union, with Africa in general, to look after those issues that you are talking about and bring them on table? Is it about communication between leadership and women who are struggling to bring those issues on table in Africa? What's the problem in between?
Yeah, the problem, as I imagine it to be, I think, is that there hasn't been measurement structures put in place to measure the successes and the failures, although they said they would come up with clear goals and clear measuring so that they could measure the success and
indicators.
The indicators. And also the fact that there is no good communication. Maybe there's no strong will as well to develop and to help women to achieve this high level of education or access to the banks, like what you are talking about, because also they found that they came up with some cooperatives, for example in Zimbabwe, whereby women would have cooperatives, then they would be given money to do a cooperative project, but now no one was really teaching them the skills on how to manage those cooperatives, or how to manage the finance, or how to work together. So because any small conflict, most of the cooperatives fell apart, and also the money was not used as it was supposed to be used. The small profit they got, instead of investing it again, they used it and to sustain their families. So there wasn't enough support for some of these programs.
What would you say would be the bridge between those development goals and requirements that we have in our communities?
I think the bridge should be that, for example, in some cases we have activists, we have, for example, women development programs that they have come up with, and mostly they are being supported by non-governmental organizations from Europe, America, and so forth. What should be done is that they should come and talk with these communities and understand what they need and how to do it. But what has been happening was an up-down approach, which has not worked, because in up-down approach you don't know what the people really need. So you go there and the people are not appreciative of whatever these non-governmental organizations have been proposing, such that some of them ended up feeling that they were these ungrateful people who don't appreciate what we are doing. But the issue is not they are not ungrateful, but what is being supported or asked for them to do is not what they feel is the priority. So working with the people and having negotiations with them and include them in whatever they want, so that the projects can be successful.
Let's talk a little bit maybe also about some solutions. You are an African woman. You've been living in Zimbabwe, in South Africa. You've been in gender studies. You know what's going on, and you have skills and education about these kind of questions. So I would love to know some solutions, especially about how to protect a girl or a woman, to avoid forced marriage or early marriage, or also to have, let's assume it doesn't work, a woman or a girl is married and then she's pregnant very early and she has to drop the school, everything has to change abruptly. How to avoid this kind of situation, which we all the time see happening in Africa?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there is a problem that young girls, they go to school, and then when they are at school, if they become pregnant, they drop out. I think what is important is that we should have more mobilization so that they can get access to family planning methods. They should be taught, but there is also in Africa this thing that sex is not talked about, yet it's real. Girls, they don't prepare themselves. Yes, taboo, and then they don't prepare themselves. And when it's talked about in the sense that they are supposed to prepare for example, genital mutilation, circumcision and so forth, to prepare for marriage. So it's like that's the only way it's understood. But I think there is need for sex education to teach these girls and young men as well, who end up in situations of marriage when they are not ready for it. So in schools, or there should be sex education. There should be family planning, mobilization and education. And also we have activists. They should be actively involved and supported when they are teaching these things to these girls. And we also have this situation whereby if they don't want to get married for young girls, the chiefs and leaders in Africa should come together and condemn it. For example, there's a Malawian female chief last year who was all over the news. She said girls must go to school. If any man tries to marry a young underage girl, it's going to be a crime. And if any parent also tries to force their daughter to get married when they are underage, it's going to be a crime. And because of that, there was a huge change. Men also understood it and they supported it, and many girls have gone to school.
Now, would you say that these sustainable development goals that has taken over the Millennium Development Goals for another 15 years and going to end in 2030 would be a success?
It would be good if they could be a success, but they can only be a successful if there is a resolution or resolve to achieve them. So what I would suggest is that governments really need to be pushing very strongly for the achievement of these development millennial goals. And also activists in different countries should be really mobilizing so that people know about them, and then so that they get enough support. And then also the developed countries, because when they were passed, the developed countries promised that they were going to financially support. So developed countries should financially support. And also the poorer nations or poor governments, they promised that they were going to be accountable. They were going to be open, they were going to improve their governance institutions. So if all this is done, then I think they can be achieved.